asserting my temporal prerogative, recovering my allotted duration, reclaiming my time. In the sweltering heat of July 2017, within the hallowed and austere chambers of the House Financial Services Committee, then Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin sat positioned at the witness stand, endeavoring to formulate responses to a barrage of inquiries, striving yet ultimately faltering, because Congresswoman Maxine Waters was categorically unwilling to tolerate his evasions. These three specific words, uttered with rhythmic and relentless conviction, served to repeatedly truncate his testimony and silence his objections, effectively transforming a standard parliamentary procedure into a weaponized digital phenomenon that captivated the national consciousness. The resulting footage surged across the internet with the force of an atmospheric explosion, amassing over 20 million views and inspiring an endless array of gospel reinterpretations, cultural parodies, and digital tributes. In the eyes of the burgeoning resistance, this anti-Maxine persona emerged as a definitive hero, a figure characterized by a bold and fearless refusal to accept any degree of perceived insolence from the Trump administration's Treasury Secretary, radiating what many described as a sovereign and commanding energy that birthed trending hashtags, commercial apparel, and lucrative literary contracts. Within the echelons of the Democratic Party, the display was heralded as a triumph, celebrating a leader who possessed the requisite fortitude and backbone to confront political adversaries directly. She was viewed as a stateswoman who would not permit Republican colleagues to marginalize her influence, a seasoned legislator who had mastered the intricate rules of the House and wielded them with surgical precision. On the 14th of February in the year 2026, within the same historic committee room located in the Rayburn House Office Building Room 2128, with its soaring ceilings, ornate mahogany paneling, and an atmosphere thick with the gravity of Washington's institutional power, a different scene unfolded in the very place where political legacies are often tested or terminated. Waters occupied her seat, though the political landscape had shifted. While the Republicans had regained control of the House, she remained the ranking member of the Financial Services Committee, a position of significant influence overseeing the complexities of global banking and issues of systemic corruption, an irony that some observers found increasingly difficult to ignore. The hearing was formally designated on placards as Government Accountability and Ethics in Federal Banking Oversight, and the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, had requested the opportunity to provide formal testimony. In a gesture of professional courtesy, Waters had consented to his appearance, offering a measured smile as she harbored the expectation that she would dictate the flow of the session, compelling the speaker to endure uncomfortable questioning for the benefit of her political base. Johnson entered the room, attired in a meticulously tailored navy blue suit and a traditional crimson necktie, his gentle Louisiana cadence belying the sharp mind of a 53-year-old constitutional scholar who possessed a remarkably youthful countenance. Having achieved the fastest ascent to the speakership in over 140 years, he carried with him 3 substantial banker boxes, heavy containers that he deposited onto the witness table with a resonant thud that echoed throughout the chamber. Those in the gallery leaned forward in anticipation, wondering what materials were contained within those boxes, while Waters maintained a polite and camera-ready expression, operating under the assumption that this would be a perfunctory proceeding. However, Johnson did not reciprocate the smile. He regarded her with a calm and patient intensity as he took his seat, meticulously adjusted the microphone, and opened the lid of the primary container. "Chairwoman Waters," he began, his tone that of a Southern gentleman, respectful in form, yet potentially devastating in intent. Before we proceed with the formalities, I would appreciate the opportunity to address several pertinent questions, at which point her smile began to dissipate. He extracted a specific file and laid it before him. revealing the unmistakable letterhead of the Federal Election Commission with numerous sections highlighted in vivid colors. Let us engage in a candid discussion regarding how you have been reclaiming the resources of the American taxpayer throughout your 33-year tenure, he stated, causing the room to fall into a sudden and heavy silence as the rapid-fire clicks of camera shutters documented the moment. Audible gasps emerged from the gallery. A stir of unease moved through the Democratic side of the aisle, and the Republicans leaned in with focused attention as Waters reached for her water glass, inadvertently jostling it in the process. The liquid sloshed within the glass as she steadied her hand, realizing that this session would not be routine, but rather a profound and perhaps final reckoning. Johnson proceeded without hesitation, eschewing pleasantries and small talk in favor of a direct and clinical approach. Chairwoman Waters, you represent the 43rd Congressional District of California. Is that an accurate statement? He inquired, his tone that of a professional litigator, establishing the foundational facts of a case to which he already possessed the answers. Waters adjusted her own microphone and replied that the gentleman was well aware that she had represented the 43rd District for over 3 decades. 33 years, to be mathematically precise, since the year 1991, Johnson clarified as he produced large-format, high-definition color prints and displayed them on the table for her to see. During those 3 decades, you have consistently maintained that you are a champion for some of the most economically disadvantaged citizens in California, correct? He asked. Waters responded that she had indeed dedicated her entire career to the advocacy of underserved populations, to which Johnson requested a simple, affirmative or negative response regarding the poverty of her constituents. Following a brief and heavy pause, she answered in the affirmative. Johnson Cephas reached into the second box and retrieved additional photographs, which were projected onto the screen behind him in a split-frame format. On the left side was a sprawling 6,000-square-foot colonial mansion, located in a gated community with a perfectly manicured lawn in Hancock Park. On the right side were images of South Los Angeles featuring boarded-up windows, sprawling homeless encampments, and chain-link fences. The residence on the left is your personal home, acquired in 2004, and currently appraised at approximately $6 million, whereas the images on the right represent the 43rd District, the very area you are sworn to represent, he noted. A murmur of whispers rippled through the gallery as cameras zoomed in to capture Waters' reaction as she shifted visibly in her seat. Mr. Speaker, I fail to see the relevance of my personal residence to this hearing, she countered. Johnson responded, Chairwoman, your constituents live in profound indigence, with 43% of them, 161,000 individuals, subsisting below the poverty line, struggling to afford the basic necessities of life, while you reside in a $6 million estate? Why is there such a disparity? As the afternoon sun cast prismatic light through the high windows of the chamber, creating a stark contrast between the beauty of the room and the grim nature of the discussion, Waters argued that the speaker was making a false equivalency between personal achievement and public service. She asserted that she had worked diligently throughout her life, prompting Johnson to ask where her house was located. She stated that she had already clarified her home's location, but when pressed on which congressional district it was situated in, a 10-second silence filled the room, punctuated only by the low hum of the air conditioning system. When she remained silent, Johnson provided the answer himself. Your residence is located in California's 37th District, represented by Congresswoman Karen Bass. You have had 20 years since the last redistricting to relocate to your own district, yet you have chosen not to. Why is that? Waters looked toward her colleagues for support, but found that Congressman Raskin was preoccupied with his notes. Representative Ocasio-Cortez was focused on her mobile device, and Representative Porter was engaged in a whispered conversation elsewhere. No one moved to her defense, as she argued that the gentleman was attempting to police the residency of members of Congress. "I reside within the district I represent," Johnson declared, noting he lived in Benton, Louisiana. In the same community he has called home for years, frequenting the same markets and schools as his constituents. He then projected demographic data showing that in District 43, the poverty rate stood at 43%. Unemployment was 50% higher than the state average, and homelessness had escalated by 264% since 2009. The slides transitioned to show 40,000 people living in tents and under overpasses, with violent crime rates doubling the national average and local schools ranking in the bottom 10% of the state. In contrast, the statistics for Hancock Park showed a crime rate that was a mere fraction of that in District 43, property values 10 times higher, top-tier schools, and a median income exceeding $200,000 annually. Johnson's tone remained devastatingly calm. "You represent poverty while living in luxury. You represent crime while residing in safety. You represent failing educational systems while your neighborhood enjoys excellence. Please explain this dichotomy." Waters characterized the line of questioning as a personal attack, but Johnson maintained it was a factual comparison, pointing out that she did not share the water, the air, or the daily hardships of those she represented because she chose to live elsewhere. Her voice rose in a defensive tone as she claimed to have served her constituents faithfully for 3 decades from her residence. Johnson then opened another file and informed her that several of those constituents were present in the gallery. He introduced Marcus Johnson, an individual who had survived the violence of District 43, having witnessed a drive-by shooting at the age of 8. Marcus stood with a quiet and painful dignity, addressing the Congresswoman directly. "I lost my brother to violence in 2019. He bled out on a sidewalk while we waited 45 minutes for police to arrive. I am 37 years old and have lived in your district my entire life. Yet I have never seen you, not at a meeting, not at a vigil, not on our streets. Where are you?" Waters was momentarily speechless as the cameras captured her stunned expression. Johnson then introduced Kesha Thompson, a single mother who worked 3 jobs but remained homeless, living in her vehicle within the district. Kesha stood and spoke with a tired but resolute voice. "I have voted for you in every election because of your promises of change and help. My children are hungry, and we are still without a home. Yet, you have secured a mansion. It seems only some people received the help you promised." Following another heavy silence, Jamal Roberts, a 17-year-old student at Crenshaw High School, stood and spoke of the systemic failures in his education, noting the lack of counselors and resources. "I want to succeed, but the system you are supposed to fix is broken. Have you ever even visited my school?" he asked before sitting down. Johnson allowed the weight of these testimonies to settle over the room for nearly 20 seconds as the gallery murmured, and members of both parties appeared increasingly uncomfortable. He then leaned forward and asked Waters if she had ever walked those streets at night, or if she had ever experienced the fear of gunfire or the desperation of homelessness. When she accused him of grandstanding, he continued to present harsh, unvarnished photographs of the district's reality homeless camps and crime scenes, contrasted with her gated life in the affluent area between West Hollywood and Beverly Hills. When Waters attempted to invoke the complexities of representing a diverse urban district, Johnson countered that the complexity was simple. She would not live there because, after 33 years of her leadership, the area was not safe enough, or the schools were not good enough for her own family. He stacked the photos into a neat pile and stated flatly, "Your constituents live in poverty, while you reside in a $6 million mansion. That is not representation. It is exploitation. As Waters tried to interrupt with her signature phrase, Johnson looked at her with a deadly politeness and remarked, "Chairwoman, with all due respect, you cannot reclaim time you never truly possessed, and you have been reclaiming taxpayer funds for 30 years. Please let me finish." The room went completely silent, as her own famous phrase was weaponized against her, leaving her stunned and defeated in her chair. Johnson then moved to the second box, producing a thick stack of Federal Election Commission documents regarding her family. He displayed row after row of highlighted payment records from her campaign committee to her daughter, Karen Waters. The slides detailed a staggering progression of payments over the years: $200,000, $600,000, and reaching into the hundreds of thousands for the most recent election cycles. The final slide revealed a grand total of over $750,000 paid to her daughter since 2004. When asked what her daughter did to earn nearly $750,000, Waters defensively explained that she coordinated slate mailers, a practice she claimed was entirely legal and approved by the FEC. Johnson produced examples of these mailers, calling them anachronisms, and pointing out that she was the only federal candidate still utilizing this method to enrich a family member. He traced the flow of money. Other candidates paid Waters' campaign to be included on the mailers, and that money then flowed directly to her daughter. Johnson noted that while the FEC may have issued an advisory opinion on this decades ago, it likely did not intend for a representative to enrich their offspring for 20 years. He then showed what $750,000 could have achieved in District 43, such as funding 15 teachers or housing 150 homeless families. He accused her of prioritizing her family's wealth over her constituents' welfare, quoting public records that showed her daughter living a luxurious lifestyle while her constituents struggled in shelters. Despite Waters' objections, the Republican chairman permitted Johnson to continue, and he expanded the scope to include her son, Edward Waters, and her husband, Sidney Williams. He cited a 2004 Los Angeles Times report indicating that her relatives had made more than $1 million through connections assisted by her office. He further detailed the involvement of her husband with One United Bank and her grandson, Mikhail Moore, who served as her chief of staff. Johnson characterized the operation as Waters Incorporated, a family business funded by the public service of the taxpayer. He then turned to the findings of the liberal watchdog group, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, CREW, noting that she had been named to their most corrupt list 4 separate times. He pointed out that her own ideological allies had recognized a pattern of corruption, a charge Waters dismissed as politically motivated, though she lacked a substantive rebuttal. Johnson concluded this segment by asking how anyone could trust her to investigate banking corruption when she herself was the embodiment of it. As Waters sat with shaking hands, unable to meet the gaze of the constituents in the gallery, Johnson moved into the details of the 2008 financial crisis. He recounted the collapse of Lehman Brothers and the creation of the TARP program, noting that One United Bank, where her husband held significant stock, was on the brink of failure. He presented evidence that Waters had arranged a meeting with the Treasury Department specifically for One United, resulting in a $12 million bailout that protected her husband's financial interests, while her own constituents were losing their homes to foreclosure. He highlighted that while she was cleared of charges on a technicality, her grandson received a letter of reproval for his role in the conflict of interest. Johnson argued that during the worst economic crisis in 80 years, she had used her influence to save her husband's bank rather than the homes of the families in her district. He showed that the $12 million given to the bank could have prevented 800 foreclosures in District 43. Finally, he addressed recent FEC violations from 2019 and 2020, where her campaign accepted illegal contributions and made untraceable cash payments, resulting in a $68,000 fine. He summarized her career as a 20-year pattern of continuous corruption, from the 2005 Most Corrupt designation to the recent FEC penalties. In his final summation, Johnson presented the data of her 33-year tenure as a series of failures. Poverty, crime, and homelessness had all worsened under her representation, while her personal wealth grew. He referenced the fact that some of her own constituents had labeled her a poverty pimp, a term reflecting their belief that she profited from their ongoing misery. He concluded by stating that she was unfit to chair the committee or serve in Congress, having chosen power and family enrichment over the people she was sworn to protect. As Johnson walked out of the room, leaving Waters in a state of visible defeat, the video of the exchange began to go viral, marking what many saw as the final collapse of her political legacy.